Hi parents, it's Miss Callahan again. Sorry I sound a little nasally. I'm coming down with a cold. Okay, so this week's homework is called The World's Greatest Sandwich. And what it does is it helps students understand the contact forces between objects. So today we took a look at a vehicle that was being towed by another vehicle. So one vehicle is stuck in the mud, and the other vehicle is trying to get pulled out of the mud using a rope. And so students needed to figure out what components were interacting with each other within the system and identify different things that they notice about those two vehicles. So eventually the students made what's known as a free body diagram. Free body diagrams take components that are pretty complicated within systems, and they simplify the components themselves. So you just draw the component with a square or a rectangle, and then you label it. So we have car 1, rope, car 2, and the rope is being pulled between car 1 and car 2. The wheels of the car are attached to the mud, and then the mud is a part of earth, and earth is what gives everything else, or is what's interacting with gravity. And so we have gravity because we have earth, and so we always incorporate earth within our free body diagrams. So they will need to do something like this when they are determining or when they're creating the free body diagram for their sandwich. The arrows in between, so these red marks are arrows, they represent the contact force that's being applied between those two components. So there's a contact force between car 1 and the rope, between the rope and car 2. Then there's a contact force between car 1 and the mud, which is where the wheels touch, and car 2 and the mud. And then there's a contact force between the mud and the earth. Notice that car 1 and car 2 don't physically touch each other. They don't come into contact with each other directly. So there is not a contact force between car 1 and car 2. Then in class, we filled out this chart where the plus sign between the vehicle and the rope, that plus symbol represents that those two do share a contact force between them. But vehicle 1 and vehicle 2 have a minus sign because they do not share a contact force. They are not touching. And so your child will need to recreate this chart using the ingredients from the sandwich. So instead of saying vehicle, they'll write bread. Instead of rope, it'll be meat. Instead of tomato, or vehicle 2, it'll say tomato, so on and so forth. So their homework is this page. I'm sorry if the sandwich didn't come out so well. But they're going to take the components, which I've underlined in the paragraph. They're going to take their components and they are going to construct a model that shows the contact forces acting between those components. So that's the first thing they need to do for 5 points. Part 2 is they need to make the table that lists the contact forces between those components. So part 1 might look like something like this, where you have rectangles that represent the layers of the sandwich, and then you need to name the layers, and then you'll draw arrows between the layers that are touching. For example, the top ingredient would be bread, and the second ingredient is turkey. So I'll draw an arrow between the bread and the turkey. But the top piece of bread and the bottom piece of bread do not touch each other, so there is not a contact force between those two. Once they've drawn the chart, or once they've drawn the free body diagram, then they need to create the chart. Once again, instead of putting vehicle, they'll write bread. Instead of writing rope, they'll write turkey. And they'll put a plus symbol for the components of the sandwich that do touch or that do have a contact force. They'll put a minus for the parts of the sandwich that do not touch, that do not have a contact force. Color does count, and so I encourage that color is on the page. They can do it on the front of the homework assignment, on the back. They can do it on a separate page. It's fine. Homework is due on Thursday. If you need any extra help, you can always contact me through Remind. Have a fabulous day.